from there, went out to Seattle, interviewed, things worked well. My resume was curated and completely modified to fit the tech role, even though I wasn't in the tech space. So I decided to start my business then. I said, you know what, why
Mhm.
not, Mark, outside of doing recruiting, being able to help more people by starting this career services just from being in HR so much.
Hi guys, welcome to How I Got the Job. Today on How I Got the Job, we have a very special guest. He's Mark. So, how many of you are like attending interviews? I'm sure all of us have to go through that process every now and then, but what if you're attending interviews every single day? Okay, don't get me wrong here, because he's an HR and he recruits for some of the top companies in this world. So Mark keeps attending interviews every single day. He's been working for Amazon currently and he's worked for Microsoft previously and also has his own recruiting company. So welcome on How I Got the Job, Mark. We are elated to have you on board today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate you all reaching out, and I'm super excited to conduct the interview.
That's lovely. Also, like we'll learn a lot about how people can venture into HR, and most importantly, like I'm sure a lot of people might be having this question as to what goes on in the mind of a person who's interviewing you, and that's a perspective not a lot of us get to know very easily. So I'm looking forward to knowing about that from you today.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to drop some gems and give you all the knowledge you need.
That's lovely. So first things first, like how did you start off in the recruiting and HR field in the start, and from where did it all start?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So my path was very interesting. It's not like a lot of normal paths. I didn't necessarily go to school knowing that I wanted to be a recruiter or even work in the tech field.
Uh-huh.
So I actually went to school my last 2 years in Western Washington, in Bellingham, Washington, while I was playing basketball. And once I finished school, it was very interesting. You know, I went on to try my basketball professional career. So I did semi-pro for 2 years. I signed with an agent. And then I started realizing, like, okay, I'm getting older. I love basketball, but there's more than basketball. What's life after basketball? So then I wanted to
Mhm.
start navigating into getting into my career field. So the thing that a lot of us know is that once you graduate, it's a lot harder to get a job than they can see. It actually took
Yeah.
me 8 months to land a job. And I
Mhm.
realized in that process, it's because I didn't know how to write a professional resume. I didn't know how to network. I didn't know anything about making sure that my LinkedIn is updated, that I'm constantly
Yeah.
networking with individuals. So once I started figuring those things out, I really started leaning heavily on my network and then making sure that my resume was prepared. So the first job that I got was a service coordinator. So that's why I said I'm a big advocate for autism. I have a brother who's autistic. So I first got in that field working with individuals with autism, Down syndrome, and I loved it. It was a job that I got to use my empathy. I got to communicate a lot and really help people. And then from there, I ended up getting a training position within HR within the company. And the reason that that happened was because of networking. I definitely say, always networking, making sure that, the first impression that you make with somebody is a good impression. Just being
Yeah.
open to opportunities. So after 11 months of doing that first role, I got into training in HR. And then literally 2 or 3 months later, a role opened up at Amazon HQ in Seattle. So through networking again, I had my girlfriend at the time, and then also another friend of mine that was working at Amazon saying, "Hey, Mark, there's a position that's
Okay.
open. We know you haven't done tech, but we think this will be great for you." So from there, went out to Seattle, interviewed. Things worked well. My resume was curated and completely modified to fit the tech role, even though I wasn't in the tech space. And from there, it was kind of history how I got into the recruiting space.
That's lovely. So, like you mentioned, you worked with some of the biggest brands. You worked with Amazon and Microsoft. So, how is the entire process of recruiting for such big brands, knowing that you are playing a key role in developing this empire, and it has a very huge impact, especially your role because it's what that determines what kind of people are coming into the company. So, how is that entire experience? Can you take us through that?
Yeah, so at first it was very intimidating. Just like I said, I
Uh-huh.
didn't necessarily have, recruiting experience, but they put me in a
Yeah.
recruiting academy program. So, in that program, they really taught us to understand that, hey, you're at a very top tech company, but you're in the position to change individuals' lives. So the way that I
Yeah,
look at it is that, like, hey, I want to do everything I can to really help my candidate. I would say
yeah.
for me, I'm a very, I would say, candidate type recruiter. I want to make sure that the
Uh-huh.
candidate understands the benefits. I want to make sure that they understand that,
Yeah,
like, hey, this is an amazing opportunity. But if it's not for you, the company's not going anywhere. So, really making the candidate understand that although we're interviewing you, you're interviewing us. So
yeah,
once I started figuring out what worked for me, how to communicate with my candidates, how to really put them first, but also make sure that I'm doing right by the company, it made my
yeah.
situation a lot easier, and I love it. I love the communication point. I love, giving somebody a job offer that very first call. They tell me like, "Oh my gosh, this is my dream
Mhm.
company," or "This is going to change my life." That really wakes me up in the morning, gets me going before logging into the computer and starting my day.
That's lovely. Apart from recruiting for some of the top brands, you've also opened up your own agency, that's MTC Career Services, where you
Yes.
offer guidance and many skills like resume developing. So, can you take us through that process? Like, when did you decide to start that, and how has the journey been ever since?
Yeah, so I actually started that about 2019. It was at a time
Mhm.
I was working for Amazon Devices, so I was supporting them. And the nice thing about being a recruiter is that everybody thinks that you recruit for every position. So I used to have
Yeah,
college friends, and friends call me all the time about, "Hey, Mark, can you look at my resume? Can you help me with my
uh-huh.
resume? What can I do to really put myself in a better
Yeah, yeah,
position to get a job?" So once that started happening, I started realizing is that, hey, I'm going through at least 200 or 300 resumes a day. I'm reviewing resumes. I'm making sure that resumes are in
yeah,
tip-top shape so they can get to a hiring manager. So I decided to start my business then. I said, you know what? Why
mhm.
not, Mark, outside of doing recruiting, being able to help more people by starting this career services just from being in HR so much and being able to, navigate and move in my career pretty quickly at the time. So
Yeah,
once I began in 2019 and first started with my resumes, the cover letters, then I started getting into more career coaching. We also do LinkedIn optimization, so making sure that your LinkedIn is
yeah,
is tip top shape, making sure that recruiters are able to
yeah,
know that you want to network, and then also helping people on networking on LinkedIn. How to properly reach out to a recruiter, how to reach out, to a colleague or even somebody at a company in a senior position, just because you want to make a connection. So, in MTC Career Services, we are really big on elevating your career in any stage, whether that's navigating to a new job, to a new opportunity, or if you're trying to get a promotion, or let's say possibly transitioning from an IC role to a management role. So anything within career services, we do in-house, and we make sure that we do it at the top of our ability to help all of our clients.
that's lovely. So, like, how do you balance your work life between working for Amazon and then working for your own company? Does it get overwhelming at times? If yes, like, how do you manage everything so efficiently?
Yeah, so it does. It's a lot of trial and error. Even for entrepreneurs, individuals like yourself in these type of companies that have to set your own schedule, have to make sure that like, hey, I need to knock this out today. It really is something just kind of learning about myself, learning when I'm most productive. So for me, I normally get up around 5:30 in the morning, and I'm lucky enough to start my actual job at Microsoft at 9 a.m. So between
Okay.
5:30 to 9 a.m., I can do my client calls, I can do my resumes, I can do my LinkedIn. Right after I do that, I go ahead and I work out right before I start working for my 9 to 5,
Mhm.
just making sure that my mind is going. I had a little break from already working. And then, at the end of
Yeah.
the day, just kind of finishing up building content, trying to do content for my social media pages, for my YouTube page. So
Mhm.
really just understanding that balance. For me, it did take a while. I'm not going to say it was easy, but now I got a pretty good flow, and I do understand that the biggest thing is consistency. Just making sure every single day that I'm building what I'm doing brick by brick. Just making sure I have a good foundation. I have great people around me. My wife supports me doing my business, and family and friends. So that's also helps a whole lot too.
Yeah, that's lovely. So, like you mentioned earlier during this interview, that you go through around 200 to 300 resumes on a daily basis. So,
Mhm.
since you're so like it's a part and parcel of your job and you're exposed to so many resumes every single day. So, what according to you makes a resume stand out in such a huge pile of a number?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I love when I get that question. So, the first thing that I always tell my clients, or I tell anybody giving advice, is that you want to make sure that you have a template that is simple. It is kind of a how would I say? Everybody wants to have a flashy resume, or they want to have something that kind of pops
Yeah,
out to them. But that's not necessarily the best thing because our tracking system, the way that it works is that resumes that are more simple actually get to the top of the pile rather than resumes that have a lot of crazy colors or they're like super design oriented. So that's the first thing that I notice is just how the template is because that's the first thing that comes to my inbox. After
yeah,
that, what I look at is that I look at my basic qualifications. So for individuals that are applying for roles, you want to make sure that your resume hits all the basic qualifications that's in that role and then some of those preferred qualifications. So for instance, since I'm a tech recruiter, software engineer, I'm looking for a role, the very first thing I'm going to look at is, what is their coding languages? Do you have C sharp on your resume? Do you have Java? Do you have Python? Do you have a coding language
yeah,
that we can use? Once you have that,
yeah,
my next initial scan will be your degree because in my role we need you to have a CS degree. So do you have a computer science degree? Once you have that, bam, that's two things that check, and then I look for some of the keywords. Are you working with stakeholders? Are you cross-functionally collaborating? Are you designing, implementing? So in an amount of, to believe it or not, 7 to 10 seconds, I can see all those things. If I can see
yeah,
all that within that time, and then the very last thing is how many years of experience do you have? I send that resume to my hiring manager. So to
mhm,
just kind of reiterate what I said, you want to make sure that you do have a simple format. You want to make sure that you hit all those basic qualifications. You have those key words and those eye-catching words on your resume, and then you want to make sure that you have the experience that makes you qualify for the role.
yeah. So now that you've been talking about qualifications and experience, I'd like to put forth a case like if someone's from a different educational background or went on to realize later in their college or university that they want to pursue something, and instead of getting a degree, they have relevant experience in that career path. Like you said, someone who knows Java, who's pretty good at it, and has plenty of coding experience but doesn't necessarily have a degree that backs
Mhm.
up that, what would an HR who's recruiting be when he sees such a kind of a resume? Do you think people like that stand chances given that they have the experience and the knowledge that's needed for a certain job?
Yeah, most definitely. So the biggest thing that matters in that, and it's kind of tough, but it really is that basic qualification. There are some roles, for instance, that I post personally that'll say
Yeah,
bachelor's degree in computer science
yeah.
or related experience. So you want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're finding the roles that have the or related experience, just in case you don't have the
Okay.
degree. Another thing that I would say, just my honest opinion, what would help is that if you don't necessarily have a degree in that field, or if you might not have the exact experience that they're looking for, you want to make sure that you are networking with somebody in that company. So even in my company itself at MTC Career Services, we give you curated email templates or curated LinkedIn templates of a reach out that will give you a better chance for somebody to contact you back. So you want to make sure that if you don't necessarily have that relative experience, if you don't necessarily have that degree itself, you want to make sure that you're actively connecting with the recruiters or individuals within that company so then they can speak on the experience that you do have. But I would also say outside of that, certifications are great. Having Google certifications, having LinkedIn certifications that align to the role that you're looking for is also something that can help a lot when you don't necessarily have that educational experience needed.
Okay, that was very insightful. So, as someone who recruits very actively and also as someone who is placed with one of the top tech companies in the world, so what, according to you, is that one or top three qualities? Let's say, what, according to you, are the top three qualities for one to land up their dream job in a big company that they aspire to be a part of? So, what, according to you, are those top three qualities one should have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can think of a lot of ones, but the ones that come off on the top of my head is,
Yeah.
can you deliver results?
Uh-huh.
At the end of the day, at these big companies, one thing that I learned transitioning into this world of top tech is that they want
Yeah.
individuals who can deliver. So if that's necessarily you, working later, or you're not even working, a full 8 hours, but being able to figure out how can I deliver and give great results every single time I present something. So the first thing I would
Yeah.
say is making sure that you can deliver results at whatever level you're at or whatever company, and being able to
Mm-hmm.
show that on your resume through quantity, through numbers, through data. The second thing
Okay.
I would say is communication. And when I say
Mm-hmm.
communication, I don't necessarily mean that, everything that you say is perfect English. By communication, I
Yeah.
mean making sure that you're clear and concise with what you're saying and what you're talking about. In a lot of meetings, you might not have, the full 30-minute window to explain everything that you need to explain. You might only have a 5-minute window or 7-minute window. So you want to make sure that everything that you are saying is concise, is sincere, is concise and clear, and you're getting straight to the point. And then the last thing that I would say is, one thing that really stands out is, are you a good team player? Um, a lot of individuals kind of look past that of like, hey, being a good team player, collaborating. But in these tech companies, they want people that they like to work with. You're going to spend a lot of time with your engineers. You're going to spend a lot of time with your HR managers, your recruiters. Can you collaborate well? Can you work good? And can you make people better around you? So I would definitely say those three things are probably the biggest keys: delivering results, communication, and then collaborating with other people.
Yeah, so following up your answer, I had a counter question to raise. So,
Mhm.
in an interview, you obviously can go through their resume and know if they'll deliver results. And then, about the second thing that you mentioned, that's the communication, that'll also be pretty evident in the interview once you start talking to them. But something like if they're a team player is very hard to judge in a first interaction. So how do you come up on a conclusion, especially on qualities like that, like if they're a team player or if they are going to add any additional value to the team? How do you judge qualities like these based on just one interaction with a person?
Yeah, so it does matter on what phase I'm at as it comes to the interview process. So let's say, for
Mhm.
instance, I'm at the resume review process. So as you
Yeah.
mentioned, on your resume, I can see what type of results you bring. I can
Yeah.
see how your communication is just by how you're speaking on your resume.
Yeah,
And then when
yeah.
it does come to what type of team player, the keywords I look for is collaboration, cross-functionally
Mhm.
collaborating, partnering with, assisted,
Okay.
and then giving that data information on what you did. So from a resume standpoint, that's where I look at the team player. As it comes to an interview, all these tech companies, a little, like insight is that we ask behavioral questions. So we're going
Yeah,
to ask you questions more so on like, tell me about, one of the best projects that you worked on. Tell me about, something that you're proud of. That's when you
yeah,
can be able to say that like, hey, I worked on this, I did this, but I collaborated with this team to make them better. So,
yeah.
in the resume process, we can kind of figure it out based on, those keywords. And then as it comes to the
Yeah,
actual
yeah.
interview, we ask those behavioral questions to see what type of team player you are.
Okay, that's lovely. Also, like apart from bringing people into your team, there's another part of your job that's mainly rejecting the people
Mhm.
who don't fit in. And 99% of the times, the applicants only get the rejection email, but necessarily don't get to know the reason as to why they got rejected. So, as a person who's been actively recruiting, can you tell us the top three qualities or the top three things that put you off in case of recruiting someone or not bringing them on board? So this can be helpful for all our viewers watching this as to not make the mistakes future.
Yeah. So before giving those mistakes, one thing that I will say that is extremely tough, kind of as we mentioned, we go through so many resumes. So a lot of
Mhm.
times when we don't move forward with candidates, it's not necessarily because they're not a good fit. It's because an internal candidate might have been hired, or we have too many applicants that are in the offer stage. So of
Yeah,
course
yeah,
we wish that we could communicate that a lot easier, but just with so many resumes, to making
yeah,
sure
yeah,
that we're efficient, we just have to send those emails out. But I would say once a candidate does get past the process of the resume review and we're not actually going to move forward, or they did an interview and we're not going to move forward, normally the top three things that kind of gets a candidate rejected would be experience. And what I mean by
yeah,
experience, not necessarily years of experience, like what exactly have you worked on? If you're
yeah, yeah,
not able to really communicate what you worked on, how you made that impact, how it relates to the roles that you're applying for, you're probably not going to be able to move forward. There's going to be somebody that has a better experience in that situation.
yeah,
I will also say communication. just to bring it back to that, is that that's just such a key piece. If you can't necessarily communicate with your interviewer, or make a connection, it's very hard for that interviewer to remember all, let's say, the positive things or the good things when they're going to a debrief talking about multiple candidates. So that is tough as well, the communication. And then the last point I would say is just performance. As simple as it is, it's the same as, when I play basketball. I'm a good basketball player, but I go to a tryout and that day I did not perform at my best level. It's not
Yeah,
saying that I'm a bad player, but it's just saying that, on that day I did not, give my best showing. So a lot of times I've heard interviewers say it, engineers, even myself, is that, hey, this was an amazing candidate, this was a great candidate, but they just didn't perform that well today. So we do like to let our candidates know that, hey, come back in 6 months, come back in, 3 months so you can give it another try. And then the very last thing that I would say is that for individuals that receive those reject emails is, one, try not to take it personal. I received a lot of them
yeah.
when I was applying for roles. And then the
Mhm.
second thing is that if you don't necessarily get exact feedback, reach out to the recruiter. Ask them like, hey, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to interview. I enjoy meeting the interviewers. I wanted to know, could you give me some feedback on what I can do better?
Yeah,
Recruiters love that because that shows that you are still hungry. You do still want to
yeah,
work for the
yeah.
company, and that we can give you some good tips to help you moving forward.
Okay, that's lovely. Also, as a recruiter, like this is one of the classic practices that goes on in interviews, wherein you ask the candidate towards the end of the interview if they have any questions to shoot up at you. But considering the candidate is already nervous and them getting the job lies in your hand, they basically most probably wouldn't ask questions, or even if they ask, those are very simple. So, as a recruiter and being on the opposite side, what according to you, or what do you actually expect the candidate to ask when you throw this question at them? What would be an effective question for a candidate to ask you if you were doing this in an interview?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's interesting. It's like all interviewers are different. For me personally, if somebody
Yeah,
doesn't ask a question, I understand it's been a long day. You're probably tired, exhausted.
yeah, yeah.
But for a lot of interviewers that I do know, yeah, they do just
Uh-huh.
want to see, how's the candidate's mind working. So personally, even in my personal business at MTC Career Services, I tell my clients to make sure you probably have 2 to 3 questions. So a very
Yeah,
simple one that I think that I tell my clients all the time that's very solid is, hey, in this role, what is, or pretty much, I guess the easier question would be is, for this position, what would make me successful in my first 3 months? That's a very simple question. Your first 3 months, you're kind of ramping up, you're kind of onboarding. And
yeah,
a hiring manager or recruiter can tell you, hey, shadowing will be very important for you, making sure that you're connecting with the right people. So that's a
yeah.
question that you can also ask. And then one thing that I do always say is, ask an interviewer a question that makes them want to talk about themselves. A lot of people like talking about themselves, like giving
Mhm.
information. So even when I interview, I'll ask the interviewer, hey, so what's one of the most impactful things that you've done since you've been at the company? And
Yeah,
an interviewer's eyes kind of light up. Oh wow, thanks for asking that, Mark. Actually, I worked on this. And then they go into a good spiel of what they worked on and what they kind of performed with. So I would definitely say asking about the role, asking a personal question about them so that you can make a connection. Those two things really are impactful and kind of stick with the interviewer moving forward.
that's lovely. Also, now for the entire interview, I've been asking you questions mostly from perspective of applicants, but my last question for the day would be for someone that's from the same community as yours, that's willing to get a job in HR. So what would your message tips be for those who are aspiring to become HRs with big companies and associate to big brands like you do? So this is my last question for the day.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, really kind of write down where you want to see yourself within HR. There's so many
Mhm.
different options, there's so many different places.
Yeah,
The very first step, I should say that if you go into HR, you want to have a passion for helping people and for advocating for others.
yeah,
HR has been an amazing spot for me because I get to speak up for either candidates or either people that can't necessarily speak up for themselves on the level of giving them a job. So for
yeah,
anybody going into HR, kind of make sure that you have a passion for helping others. You're able and feel comfortable and even if you don't necessarily feel comfortable, that you can get comfortable to be able to speak in rooms to make differences. And then, like I said, kind of figuring out what you like to do. If you like communicating like me, you like closing, talking about numbers,
Yeah.
making offers, recruiting might be the spot for you. If you like doing something more behind the desk, maybe being a business admin, really doing stuff behind the scenes to make a company very impactful. So, just kind of doing the research with that, and then networking with people that are already in HR. Even for me
Yeah.
personally, anybody that's watching this, if you want to go to LinkedIn, my name's Mark Hopkins, you can connect with me, or you can go to my social media platforms at Make Your Mark 2, or you can go to my business, platform on Instagram at NTC Resumes, and just reach out and just ask questions. Get as much knowledge as you can, and then find a position that you feel is right for you.
That's lovely. So, on that lovely note, we come to the end of this interview. It's been great talking to you, Mark. And this is one of our most insightful interviews. And after all the delays, I'm glad that this interview is finally taken place and definitely worth all the delays. So, thank you so much for taking time off and giving this interview. We are excited to post it as soon as possible. And I hope all our viewers also had a great time watching this interview. And guys, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And also, like, are there any questions that you would ask somebody who's in a position as Marcus? So put them in the comments below. And for many such insightful interviews, subscribe to our channel, How I Got the Job, and stay tuned. Also, who would you like us to interview next? Put that in the comments as well. And before we leave, Mark, would you like to give any short message to anybody who's watching this interview?
Yeah, I would definitely say, whenever you do watch this interview, as of right now, it's the beginning of the year. So, make
Yeah,
sure that you are evaluating, what your career goals are, or even your entrepreneur business is, making those connections, networking with people, get uncomfortable this year, and,
yeah,
have fun in this process. I love self-help. I love growing, and it's something that we're all constantly doing. So connect with people and find out what works for you. And I just want to say thank you all so much, for watching, and thank you for reaching out to me to do this. This is great. I love what you all are doing at your company. It's very insightful. I wish I had something I could watch like this in my process itself. So I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody has a great 2022.
thank you. On that lovely note, we are ending this interview here. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.